Hi, I'm E, and this is ESP for the Third Way, and I'm here to bring you closer to the center. So first, as you can see, I have a guest. This is C, and we're going to be talking about the debt again and maybe go into Medicare and that sort of stuff. Next, I'm going to talk about the Middle East update. There have been some big news down there, and we'll keep you updated. Next, Donald Trump is at the funny farm today, and stay tuned for that. That'll be interesting. And lastly, Cuba has elected a new leader, and it's not one of the Castros. They're laying the foundation. Stay tuned. So first, we're going to start off with the debt. As you can see, I have a guest, and it's C, and he'll give you a little 30-second intro about who he is and why he's here.
So, as a liberal political viewpoint, I strongly believe that it's important for the wealthy to be paying their fair share to the rest of the nation. From a social perspective, I truly believe in civil liberties and upholding those. So as long as the government can stay out of our private affairs, I believe it's more than equitable to, be paying your fair share into the government's pocket.
Understand. So thanks for letting me know. So I just want to talk about the debt cap. So I talked about last week how, with the debt cap, there's a problem because if we hit that debt cap, we're going to default on our debt. So there are really two options. We can either continue raising the debt cap or we can lower our spending dramatically or a combination of both. So what's your opinion on that? Like what is the best idea?
Well, I think that third option that you suggested, kind of a combination of lowering spending and raising the debt cap is probably the most prudent approach given the circumstances surrounding the issue. The fact that spending has just increased so substantially over the past few years, combined with the economic recessions, really made it potentially difficult for us to pay our debt holders off. America has never defaulted on their treasuries. It's still the safest investment you can make, even at the low interest rate it's at. It's troubling that countries like China and other developing economies are choosing to invest their money elsewhere these days. But the money that does come in, we do need to assert our role as being a financial world leader and be able to pay back the obligations we have to our debt holders. At the same time, we need to realize that all the money coming in can't be, reinvested at the rate that it's going right now. And it's important for the spending to come down as well as the demand for our debt continues to decrease.
Right, I agree, because we have an obligation to our United States citizens as well as the people who we owe our debt to. We can't just say, oh, by the way, so we're having some back and forth political issues. We can't pay you back right now. That's cool, right? No, I mean, the countries, they're not going to be okay with that. So, yeah.
And we've seen it on a smaller scale with municipals already defaulting, towns, cities, states are struggling for revenue at this point. It would be very unfortunate if the lender of last resort, the U.S. Treasury, was defaulting on their debt as well.
You're right. So on this issue of spending, one of the bigger names that have been talked about for possible funding changes would be the privatization of Medicare. So what's your ideas about Medicare and how should it be changed? Is it good the way it is? That sort of problem.
I think that with the case of Medicare and Medicaid, when it was instituted, it was a terrific program, and it still is, but it does need to evolve with the changing times. We have a very aging population. We also have a population that seems to culturally rely heavily on testing and prescription medication, some of which might not necessarily be so vital, and they do it just for the purpose of, having the test done, getting the medicine. So the fact that the costs are so high means we need a restructuring. I think if we could focus more on preventative care rather than a reactive care, Americans need to make better dietary choices. Americans need to stop smoking cigarettes as much as they do. A lot of avoidable ills and that plague the aging society, need to be just that. They need to be avoided. And if we could put more money into making sure we're making smarter choices to avoid having the expensive, costly treatment that comes with getting older and developing these illnesses would be a terrific step forward in this country at keeping costs down.
I agree. That's certainly an interesting perspective, that rather change the business and try to work on the doctors and the people, trying to get rid of the unnecessary tests, like you said. It's certainly interesting. However, for my idea is, I think we should be more focusing in, this is going to be incredibly unpopular with many people, but my idea is, and it's not my own, but raising the actual age of not retirement, but the age for at least Medicare. Agreed, for many, you need to change the processes and lower costs. However, when you increase the Medicare age, you can certainly decrease substantially the amount of money. And the idea behind that, while very unpopular, is that when it was created back in the 60s, the age was much lower because people lived less, as they didn't live as long. Certainly, the diseases that you were prone to certainly lasted different age. And now that people are living longer, medical treatments are they've further advanced. We need to be able to raise the age in order to decrease the costs. And while you're right, I think it's also very important to do it from the government's perspective to get rid of the costs. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to do.
The issue with raising the age, which is a terrific idea in theory, is that you want to avoid a situation where you have a gap between retired individuals who lose their health insurance through their employer or through their spouse and are kind of in this limbo period in their mid-60s, let's say, where now they're past where their previous employer is reimbursing them for their health insurance costs, and they're waiting for their Medicare to kick in. So you would have to certainly restructure a policy in which employer benefits extend further along. Maybe raise the retirement age in businesses as well, because if I'm 62 and I'm being forced out by my company and losing my health insurance benefits, I'm going to want my Medicare to kick in right away. So God forbid something happens to me between 62 and, let's say, 70, I'm protected and I'm covered.
You're right. That certainly brings up a certain problem to it. And again, I think that those problems can certainly be addressed. Again, you're right, with certain retirement ages and different retirement packages and healthcare. You're certainly right. That needs to be focused on if the retirement or the Medicare age was going to be raised. I think that's certainly something to be addressed. However, I still think it's a very important option to be considered. And I believe that politicians aren't really focusing on that because they know it's unpopular with their voters. And I think that's a problem. But that's for, the politicians to work out, and we got to see if that'll actually continue in the future. Well, thank you for coming on the show. You certainly brought a very interesting perspective, very different from certainly what we're bringing up. But hopefully I brought you to the center a little bit. We can compromise a little bit, and I hope to see you on the show again.
All right. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
So this was C, and we talked about the budget and Medicare. Next, I want to go and talk about the Middle East update. So now I'm going to give you the Middle East update. Not much has been happening in Egypt. However, a lawyer has been suing the government in order to remove President Mubarak's face and likeness from all public institutions. They say he's no longer representative of their government, and they don't want him a part of it. Now on to Libya. Gaddafi has been considered for where he might go if he steps down. However, he has been using cluster bombs and rockets, which are indiscriminate killers, in which they can kill many, many people. And it's banned by most of the world. And this is a huge problem for most of Europe and especially the United States. And we've been sending our troops there and many diplomats in order to work out a situation. And after more clashes, the rebels have actually been starting to gain some ground. They're pushing Gaddafi's troops out of certain cities, and they have been gaining control of the borders, which is an amazing feat, and they might be able to continue to support themselves. The U.S. has now been supporting some drones to send over the area in order to help out the protesters and the rebel forces. Yemen, however, is a completely different situation, because there are peaceful protests who support the government and don't support the government. However, police have been clashing with people who don't support the government, and at least one person has died. After a meeting of multiple Gulf countries, they have decided to offer the president a way out. Now, he's said that he will give his decision within 24 hours. We'll see what comes of that. As for Syria, the government has decided that they don't want to deal with these deaths anymore. People have been continuing to come out against the emergency law. And although the government has said that they will go for reforms, they've also increased their troops and they've also increased the police, and more people are dying. So it's hard to see whether or not Syria really, really wants to benefit from stepping down, whether they really will step down, and whether they'll actually go for some reform, or whether or not they're just trying to play. And lastly, we go to Jordan. They're protesting for their democratic rights, more political rights, and they want to open up their country to some reforms. Some have been more religious groups rather than for political rights, and it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Now we go to the funny farm. So we're at the funny farm today, and we see Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is running for president. He has really stepped up his game politically, and he has certainly stepped up his game in terms of campaigning. However, it's difficult to see what positions does he actually take. And the biggest question is he actually a Republican? While he's running under the Republican name, and he's certainly been coming out against Obama, the question is, what is his real positions? Now, on fiscal issues, he wants to be in charge. He wants to take charge and he's fiscally conservative. However, when he was considering running for president last time, he decided that he was pro-universal health care. Certainly something that would not be okay today, although Mitt Romney has had the same problems. But when you look at Donald Trump's track record, you have to think, what does he support? And the truth is, we're not completely sure. He's against Obama, calling him the worst president in history, although he said the same thing about Bush. And he hasn't really been very definitive on many of the big topic issues, sort of just saying, I want to run. And what it really seems is he wants to be the CEO of the United States. Maybe it'll just be a good starter up for his show again, but I don't think that he really has what it takes to become president, because we don't know what he wants. Now, it's possible he could pull it out, and toward the end, he could really, really get his campaign going. However, I think that he's just crazy for trying to push some agenda that he doesn't even know. He wants more power. I don't think it's very wise to just look for political power. I don't think it's wise to just try and get more power for its sake. And I don't think he'll be able to win without a position. Well, we're actually running out of time here. My debate earlier with C ran a little bit longer than expected, which is good, but I'm going to have to put down the Cuba topic for next week. We'll have to push it back. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned for next week, and I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, and remember to subscribe above and like it below. Thanks.